The barn was already burning when she ran inside, and he realized too late she wasn't just his cook. Smoke clawed at his throat as the roof beams groaned overhead, sparks snapping like gunfire in the dark. Caleb slammed his shoulder against the door, but it wouldn't budge. Then he saw her, disappearing into the fire, cloth over her mouth, not looking back. And somewhere inside, his son was still calling. Why did she go in? And what would she come out with? Stay with me. You're going to want to see this. The wind came down hard from the hills that morning, dragging dust across the Turner place like it had somewhere better to be. It rattled the loose boards on the fence and slipped through the cracks of the house, whispering through empty rooms that hadn't heard much of anything in a long while. Caleb Turner stood by the corral, one hand resting on the top rail, watching the sky the way a man watches something that never changes. His coat hung open, shirt sleeves rolled, hat pulled low. He didn't move much unless there was work to be done. And most days, there wasn't enough of it to fill the hours. Word had spread fast after Reverend Doyle pinned the notice to the church board. Cook needed. Room provided. No expectations beyond the work. Men had laughed. Women had looked twice. A few had come out to see the place for themselves. They never stayed long. The first woman had stepped into the house, looked around at the bare walls, the cold stove, the single chair at the table, and asked, "Where's the rest of it?" Caleb had shrugged. "That's all there is." She left before the coffee cooled. The second had asked if there'd be Sundays off. He told her he didn't keep track of days. She didn't like that answer. By the third, folks in Red Hollow Valley had already made up their minds. Caleb Turner didn't want a wife, didn't want company, just wanted someone to keep a pot on the stove and stay out of his way. By noon, the sky turned pale with heat, and the road into town shimmered like it might disappear if you looked at it too long. That's when the wagon came. It rolled in slow, wheels groaning against the rutted dirt, a thin cloud of dust rising behind it. The driver pulled the reins just outside the church, glancing once at the board, then toward the scattered buildings along the main stretch. A few heads turned. A couple of men leaned back against the post outside the general store. Mrs. Garrison paused mid-step, parcel in hand. The door creaked open. The woman who stepped down didn't hurry. She carried one case, worn at the corners. A smaller wooden box was tucked under her arm. She set both down carefully before straightening, brushing the dust from her skirt with the side of her hand. No one moved to greet her. She looked around once, slow and steady, not searching, just seeing. Caleb watched from across the street, one boot propped against the hitching post. He hadn't meant to come into town that day, but he'd needed nails, and the habit of doing things alone didn't mean he stopped needing things. Their eyes met for a brief second. She didn't look away. That alone made him push off the post. He crossed the street without hurry, boots striking the boards with a dull, even sound. Up close, he saw the dust along the hem of her dress, the faint lines at the corner of her eyes, the way her grip on the wooden box never loosened. "You hear about the notice?" he asked. Her voice came back level. "I am." He gave a short nod. "Name?" "Ivy Bennett." A murmur passed somewhere behind him. He didn't turn. "You know where you are?" someone called out, half a laugh in the words. Ivy didn't shift her stance. "I can read a sign," she said, not raising her voice. Caleb glanced back once. That was enough to quiet the rest. He picked up her case before she could stop him. It wasn't heavy. "This way," he said. The ride out to the Turner place took longer than it should have. The wind picked up again, pushing against the wagon wheels, bending the dry grass flat in long waves. Neither of them spoke much. Once he said, "Road gets worse after the bend." She nodded. "I've seen worse." That was the extent of it. The house sat low against the land. Boards faded gray. roof patched in places where storms had taken their toll. The porch sagged a little on the left side. One step dipped under weight. He didn't mention it. Inside, the air held the stale quiet of a place used for sleeping and little else. The table was clean but bare. The stove sat cold. A single tin cup rested near the sink. Ivy set her box down on the counter. She opened it without asking. Glass jars, wrapped in cloth. A small pouch of dried herbs. 2 knives, their handles worn smooth with use. She placed them one by one along the edge of the counter. Then she rested her hand flat on the surface and drew it back. A clean line cut through the dust. Caleb watched from the doorway. "You'll have the room off the back," he said. "Beds in there. Water pumps out front. Woods stacked behind the shed." She nodded, taking it in. He added, after a beat, "Meals twice a day's enough." No answer. He shifted his weight. "Only thing I need is food on time." She turned then, just enough to look at him. "And the rest?" "There isn't any," he said. Silence settled between them. Not sharp, just there. He tipped his hat back slightly, studying her as if trying to decide something that didn't quite matter yet. "Just cook," he said. "No need for talking." Ivy held his gaze a second longer than most would. "Then don't ask me to stay," she said quietly. "If I decide not to." The wind pushed against the door behind him, making it creak on its hinges. Caleb stepped aside. "Suit yourself." She turned back to the counter, already reaching for a cloth. He left her there. The sound of something shifting in the room behind him. Not loud, not sudden, but enough to make the house feel different as he stepped back into the wind. He left her there. The sound of something shifting in the room behind him. Not loud, not sudden, but enough to make the house feel different as he stepped back into the wind. The first thing he noticed was the smell. It reached him before he even touched the door that evening. Not strong, just enough. Something warm, slow-cooked, carrying through the cracks like it had somewhere to be. He stood on the porch a second longer than usual. Then he pushed the door open. The stove was lit. Not roaring, not wasteful. Just steady, a low flame doing its work. A pot rested on top, lid tilted just enough to let steam slip out in quiet bursts. The table had been wiped clean. The tin cup was gone, replaced with 2. One sat closer to his usual chair. Ivy stood at the counter, sleeves rolled, back turned. The wooden spoon moved slow through the pot, not rushed, not idle. She didn't look over. "You eat before it cools," she said. Caleb set his hat down on the peg. "Didn't ask what time." "You didn't have to." He pulled out the chair. Sat. The wood creaked under him like it always did. He picked up the spoon, dipped it once, then paused. It tasted right. Not rich, not fancy, just right. He ate without comment. Across the room, Ivy moved with purpose. She stacked plates, checked the water bucket, opened the back door just enough to let the heat settle. No wasted motion, no noise that didn't belong. Halfway through the meal, he slowed. Didn't notice at first. Just found himself taking smaller bites, stretching the time between them. When he finished, the cup beside him had already been filled. Coffee. Strong. He didn't remember seeing her pour it. "Boy eats at 6, she said, still not turning. "He'll come when he's ready." Caleb glanced toward the hallway. Sure enough, a shadow shifted at the edge of the doorway. Noah stood there, one shoulder against the frame, watching. He didn't step forward right away, just looked at the table, then at Ivy, then back at the table. "You coming or not?" Caleb said. The boy shrugged, pushed off the wall, and took the seat across from him. Ivy set a bowl down without a word. Noah sniffed once, took a bite, then another. He didn't say anything, but he didn't leave either. That was new. Days settled into place the way dust does, quiet, slow, without asking. Mornings started earlier. Caleb would step out to the pump and find the bucket already filled, the rope still swaying slightly, like someone had just let go. Inside, the stove would be warm, bread wrapped in cloth, a strip of salt pork set aside on a tin plate. He stopped asking how it got done. Out back, a loose board along the shed was nailed tight. The hinge on the gate didn't sag the way it used to. Someone had wedged a small piece of leather under it to hold the line. He noticed. Didn't say anything. Noah started lingering. Not much at first. A minute longer at the table. A glance toward the stove before heading out. Once he reached for a second piece of bread, then stopped halfway, like he'd been caught doing something he wasn't supposed to. Ivy slid the plate closer without looking up. He took it. Left a small piece behind when he was done. Didn't explain why. One morning, Caleb rode into town. The sky hung low, gray pressing down over Red Hollow Valley. The road was dry but uneven, ruts catching the wheels of passing wagons. He tied his horse outside Garrison's store. Inside, the bell over the door rang sharp. Mrs. Garrison stood behind the counter, ledger open. She looked up once, then back down. "Flour," Caleb said. "2 sacks." She wiped her hands on her apron. "Short supply this week." "You've got some." "For paying customers, yes." He set a coin on the counter. She didn't reach for it. "That woman you brought in," she said, voice even. "She came by this morning." Caleb didn't move. "I told her the same." A pause stretched between them. "She asked for credit?" he said. "No." "What did she say?" Mrs. Garrison closed the ledger. "Nothing worth repeating." He left the coin where it was, walked out without the flour. That evening, the table was set, the same as always. The pot simmered low. Bread sat wrapped. Coffee waited. Caleb stepped inside, slower this time. He looked at the shelf. No new flour. No sacks by the door. He pulled out the chair, sat, watched as Ivy lifted the lid and filled his bowl. He took a bite. Same taste, same steady warmth. He set the spoon down. "Where'd you get it?" he asked. She wiped her hands on a cloth, didn't look at him. "I didn't." He waited. "That's not what I asked." Now she turned, just enough. "I said I didn't." The room held still. Wind pressed against the walls. The stove ticked softly as the metal warmed. Caleb leaned back in his chair. "There's no flour in this house," he said. "There wasn't this morning." "And now?" She met his eyes for the first time that day. "I don't need them to keep this place running," she said. No anger, no edge, just a statement laid flat between them. Across the table, Noah watched, quiet as ever. Caleb looked down at the bowl again, then back at her. Didn't ask another question. He picked up the spoon and kept eating. The wind shifted sometime after midnight. It came down from the ridge in long, dry gusts, rattling the shutters and pressing against the walls like it meant to come through. The kind of wind that made a man wake without knowing why. Caleb's eyes opened before the sound reached him. Then it came. A sharp crack. Wood giving way. He was already on his feet when the smell hit. Smoke, thick and wrong. He stepped out onto the porch. The far end of the yard burned. Flames climbed the side of the horse barn, orange against the black sky, snapping and twisting as the wind fed them. Sparks lifted and scattered across the dry ground. "Damn it," he muttered, already moving. He grabbed the water bucket by the pump, sloshing half of it out before he made 3 steps. It wouldn't be enough, not even close. A horse screamed inside. Caleb dropped the bucket and ran. The barn door was half open, one hinge hanging loose. Smoke rolled out in heavy waves, thick enough to sting his eyes before he crossed the threshold. "Noah!" he shouted. No answer. Then, faint, somewhere deeper. "Pa!" Caleb pushed forward, pulling his sleeve over his mouth. The heat hit him hard, driving him back a step. A beam cracked above, showering sparks down near the entrance. He circled toward the side, looking for another way in. Inside, something shifted. Wood groaned. "Noah! I'm here!" The voice was closer now, but wrong. Tight, strained. Caleb lunged toward it, but the front beam gave way with a heavy snap, dropping across the opening in a burst of embers. Heat surged outward, forcing him back again. "Stay where you are!" he shouted, though he wasn't sure the boy could hear. Behind him, the house door slammed open. Footsteps crossed the yard fast. Ivy didn't stop to ask. She grabbed the spare bucket, dunked it into the trough, then reached for a length of cloth hanging by the fence. She soaked it through, wrung it once, and wrapped it around her mouth and nose. Caleb turned, just as she passed him. "Don't," he started. She was already gone around the back. The side door was smaller, half hidden behind stacked boards and an old saddle frame. The fire hadn't reached it yet, but the smoke had. Ivy kicked it once. It stuck. She stepped back and drove her shoulder into it. The wood gave. Inside, the air was worse. Thick, heavy, every breath a fight. She kept low, one hand against the wall, moving by memory more than sight. "Noah," she called, voice muffled through the cloth. A cough answered her. She followed it. The boy knelt near the far stall, one arm around the neck of a trembling colt, trying to pull it free from a tangle of rope. "It's stuck," he rasped. Ivy dropped beside him. Didn't waste time. "Let it go." He shook his head hard. "It'll burn." She reached for the knot, pulled once, tight. The rope had twisted under weight. Another crack split the air behind them. The roof sagged slightly, embers falling through the slats above. "Listen to me," she said, firm now. "You come with me." He hesitated. She cut the rope. The colt jerked free, bolting past them toward the open side, disappearing into the smoke. Noah froze a second, then turned back. Ivy took his arm. "Now!" They moved low, quick, the way you do when there's no time left to think. The side door burned at the edges when they reached it. She shoved it open with her shoulder, pushing Noah ahead of her into the night air. He stumbled out, coughing hard. Caleb was there in 2 strides, dropping to one knee beside him. "You all right?" he asked, voice rough. Noah nodded, still trying to catch his breath. Caleb looked past him. Ivy stepped out a second later. Her hands trembled once at her sides before she steadied them. The cloth slipped from her face, damp and streaked with ash. A thin line of smoke trailed from the edge of her sleeve. For a moment, none of them spoke. The fire cracked behind them, louder now, as the structure gave way piece by piece. Hank Miller came running in from the far pasture, boots hitting the dirt hard. "Where'd it start?" he shouted over the noise. Caleb shook his head. Didn't see. Hank circled the front, kicking through debris, then stopped near the door. He bent down, picked something up, held it between his fingers. "Cloth," he said. "Smells like oil." Caleb's jaw tightened. He didn't answer. Behind him, Ivy sat on the ground, one knee drawn up, catching her breath slow and steady. Noah had moved closer to her without thinking, his shoulder brushing her arm. She didn't pull away. Caleb noticed that. He walked over, stopping a step short. Her hands were red along the edges, the skin already tightening where the heat had caught her. He reached out before he thought better of it. His fingers closed lightly around her wrist. She stilled. For a second, neither moved. Then she slipped her hand free. Not fast, not harsh. Just enough. Caleb let his hand fall back to his side. The fire burned down to embers before dawn. The barn stood half gone, blackened beams reaching up like broken ribs against the pale morning sky. No one spoke much. There wasn't anything to say yet. Only the quiet understanding that this hadn't been an accident, and something else. Something that had shifted again. Something that had shifted again. It showed itself in the quiet first. The house stayed warm, but not in the same way. The stove burned steady, yet the air between rooms felt thinner, like something had been pulled loose and not put back. Ivy worked the same hours. Up before sunrise. Water drawn. Bread wrapped. Coffee set where it always had been. But she spoke less. Not out of distance, just less. Caleb noticed it in the small things. The way she no longer paused when he stepped into the room. The way her hands moved quicker, finishing tasks before he had a chance to say anything at all. Noah noticed too. He lingered closer to her now, not farther. Sat at the table longer. Once he reached for her sleeve, then stopped himself halfway and dropped his hand. She pretended not to see. 3 days after the fire, a wagon rolled into town. It came slow, careful over the ruts, the driver guiding it like he carried something worth more than the road deserved. Folks stepped out to watch. They always did. The woman who stepped down carried herself differently. Clean dress, gloves still on, a hat pinned just right. Not a speck of travel dust stayed long on her. She brushed it off before it could settle. "Clara Whitfield," someone said near the general store. The name moved fast. Reverend Doyle came out from the church before the wagon fully stopped. Caleb heard about it before noon. Hank brought the word, leaning on the fence like it was nothing. "Preacher's guest," he said. "Came in from the east. Says she was meant to answer your notice." Caleb didn't look up from the post he was setting. "Didn't," he said. Hank shrugged. "Seems she's here now." Clara didn't come to the ranch right away. She stayed in town, helped at the church, spoke soft, smiled when spoken to, carried herself like she had a place already waiting, even if no one had pointed it out yet. People liked that. It made things easier. By the second day, Mrs. Garrison had flour set aside for her. By the third, she was invited to supper at the Doyle house. No one said it plain, but it settled in the way folks looked toward the Turner place. That evening, Caleb stood in the yard longer than he needed to. The rebuilt frame of the barn still smelled of char. The air carried it even when the wind shifted. Inside, the lamp was lit, same as always. He stepped up onto the porch, didn't go in. Through the window, he saw Ivy at the table, not working, not moving, just sitting there, a folded cloth in her hands. She smoothed it once, then again, set it down, picked it up again. The motion didn't belong to any task. Caleb watched a moment longer. Then he turned away, walked the length of the porch and back again before finally opening the door. Supper was quiet. Not empty, just careful. Noah ate slow. Ivy kept her eyes on her plate. Caleb drank his coffee while it was still too hot. Halfway through, Noah spoke. "They say she came for the job." No one answered. "The lady in town," he added. Caleb set his cup down. "I heard." Noah looked between them. "She gonna come here?" Ivy reached for the bread, broke it clean in half. "That depends," she said, voice even. "On what?" Noah asked. She set one half on his plate. "On what your father decides." Caleb's jaw tightened slightly. He didn't answer. The next morning, Clara came out to the ranch. She rode in with Reverend Doyle, the horse stepping careful over the uneven ground. Her boots were clean, her posture straight. Caleb met them at the gate. She smiled when she saw him. "Mr. Turner," she said, voice soft, practiced. I'm afraid I'm late. He nodded once. You are. Reverend Doyle cleared his throat. Miss Whitfield was delayed, he said. Family matters back east, but she was the one I had in mind when I posted your notice. Caleb's gaze flicked once toward the house. The door stood open. Ivy was there, not close enough to hear every word, close enough to see. Clara followed his glance. Her smile didn't falter. I understand you've already found help, she said. That's right, Caleb answered. A small pause. Well, Clara said, folding her gloves in her hands, perhaps we might still talk. Behind him, the screen door shifted. Ivy stepped out onto the porch. She didn't come down the steps, didn't interrupt, just stood there. The wind moved through the yard, lifting a loose strand of her hair before settling again. Clara turned slightly, taking her in with a single look. Not long, not unkind. Just enough. I won't be in the way, Clara said gently. I only came to see what had been arranged. Ivy's voice came from the porch, quiet but clear. I was hired to work, she said. Nothing more. Clara inclined her head. Of course. Caleb stood between them. The distance felt wider than the yard itself. Reverend Doyle shifted his weight. Perhaps we should head back, he said. Clara didn't move right away. She looked at Caleb once more. If you reconsider, she said, I'll be in town. Then she turned, stepping back toward the wagon. The wheels rolled slow as they left. Dust rose behind them. Caleb remained at the gate. Didn't move. Behind him, the porch creaked softly. Ivy had already gone back inside. That night, the house felt colder. No wind, no reason for it. Caleb stepped through the door and stopped. The stove was dark. No flame, no heat, no pot. The table sat empty. For the first time since Ivy had come, the house held nothing at all. He stood there a long moment. Then he moved toward the back room. The door was half open. Inside, her things were folded. Neat. Ready. Not gone. Not yet. Not yet. The word hung there without being spoken. Caleb stood in the doorway, looking at the small room where Ivy's things had been folded and set aside like they no longer belonged to the house. The lamp behind him cast a long shadow across the floorboards, stretching toward her bed, but never quite reaching it. He didn't step in, didn't touch anything, just stood there long enough to feel the quiet settle deep in his chest. Then he turned. Sunday came with a pale sky and a wind that had finally gone still. The church sat at the edge of town, white boards catching the early light, the bell rope swaying slightly, though no one had pulled it yet. Wagons lined the road, horses tied along the rail. Word had spread. It always did. Caleb arrived late. Hat low, boots dusted, hands empty. Inside, the benches were filled, heads turned, then turned away again like nothing needed to be said out loud. At the front, Reverend Doyle stood near the pulpit. Clara sat in the first row, gloves folded in her lap, posture straight as ever. She didn't look back. Ivy stood near the rear, not hidden, just not placed anywhere. She kept her hands together, fingers still, eyes lowered to the worn wood floor. Caleb saw her before he took a step inside. He didn't look away. The service moved slow. Scripture read, hymns sung, voices rising and falling in a rhythm that had nothing to do with the weight in the room. When it ended, people didn't leave right away. They lingered, waiting. Reverend Doyle cleared his throat. Mr. Turner, he said, voice carrying just enough. Perhaps now would be a time to speak on Arrangements. A quiet ripple passed through the benches. Clara lifted her chin slightly. Caleb moved forward. One step, then another. The sound of his boots on the wooden floor seemed louder than it should have been. He stopped near the front, didn't turn to face the preacher, didn't look at Clara. Instead, he turned halfway, toward the back, toward where Ivy stood. The room stilled. "She came here to work," someone muttered under their breath. Caleb heard it, didn't answer. He took one more step, then another, until he stood in the aisle between them all. "I said I needed a cook," he began. His voice wasn't raised, didn't need to be. "I thought that was enough." No one moved. He let the words sit. Then he shook his head once. It wasn't. Clara's fingers tightened slightly in her lap. Reverend Doyle shifted his weight. Caleb kept going. "That house," he said, glancing down for a moment before looking back up. "That house wasn't living when she walked into it." A pause. "And it is now." The wind pressed once against the church walls, then fell quiet again. "I don't need someone to fill a chair," he said. "I need the one who stayed standing when there wasn't anything to hold on to." He didn't look at Clara, didn't say her name. He just stepped down from where he stood, walked the length of the aisle, stopped beside Ivy. Close enough that the space between them disappeared, but he didn't touch her, didn't reach. Just stood there. Ivy lifted her head. Her eyes met his. For a second, nothing else in the room mattered. No whispers, no waiting. Just that look. Behind them, a bench creaked. Someone stood, then sat again. Reverend Doyle said nothing. Clara lowered her gaze, hands still folded, face composed in a way that didn't break, even now. Noah moved first. He slipped out from his place, crossed the narrow space and took Ivy's hand, not asking, just holding it. Caleb saw it, didn't say a word. He only stayed where he was. Some people left, not all at once, a few at a time, boots against wood, the door opening, closing. Others remained, quiet, watching. The kind of quiet that doesn't fight something, but doesn't fully accept it either. That would come later. Or it wouldn't. Caleb didn't wait to find out. 3 years passed the way seasons do out there, marked more by the ground than the calendar. The Turner place changed. The porch was fixed. The step held steady now. A second window had been cut into the side of the house, letting more light into the kitchen. The stove was rarely cold. Some mornings 2 pots sat warming at once. By midday, a rider might stop by, or a neighbor, or someone passing through who'd heard there was a place that served a decent meal without asking too many questions. Ivy moved through it all the same way she had from the start. No wasted motion, no need for permission. Children began to gather by the porch in the afternoons. Not many at first. A slate board leaned against the wall. Chalk marks filled and erased. Letters written slow and careful. Noah sat among them sometimes. Taller now, quieter in a different way. Caleb came in at dusk. Every day. He didn't stop at the door anymore. Didn't stand on the porch listening. He stepped inside. Set his hat down. Sat at the table like he belonged there. One evening, the light hung low across the valley, turning the dust in the air gold. Ivy stood at the stove, stirring something slow. Caleb took his seat. Didn't speak right away. The room held that same quiet it always had, but it wasn't empty anymore. He reached for the cup, took a drink, set it down. "The food's warm," he said. Ivy didn't turn. Didn't need to. It always is. And maybe that's what stays with you, not the fire, not the whispers, not even the moment he chose her in front of everyone. It's this. A quiet table, a warm meal, a place where no one has to stand alone anymore. If you sit with it long enough, you start to wonder, what would you have done? Would you have walked away when the town turned its back? Would you have kept your head down, chosen the safer road, the easier life? Or would you have stayed, like she did? There's something about that kind of staying. Not loud, not stubborn for the sake of pride, just steady. The kind that builds a home out of nothing but small, faithful acts. One meal, one hand reached out, one moment of courage at a time. And maybe that's what love looks like, more often than we admit. Not grand words, not perfect timing, just someone who sees you clearly and decides to stay anyway. If this story found its way into your heart, I'd like to hear what you think. What moment stayed with you the longest? There are more stories like this waiting. Quiet ones, strong ones, the kind that remind us what people are capable of when they choose each other. And if you'd like to walk into those stories with me, you're always welcome here.